Hi guys, this is part of your class, Module 4 on the priestly writers. So I want to share with you a few thoughts that I have. Hope that by watching it or listening to this, hopefully not longer than half an hour discussion on the priestly authors, you'll get a little better understanding of who they were. I'm not going to show you any graphics, so if you just want to listen, that's also fine as well. And since my eyes will be looking down at my notes, part of the time, it's absolutely fine just to listen to this. So I want to just present an outline for you of the book. Chapters 1 through 7 offer instruction concerning sacrifice. 8 through 10, a narrative regarding the consecration of the tabernacle, the altar, and the priest, the offerings of illicit fire and its consequences. 11 through 15, instructions concerning purity and impurity. 16, instructions concerning the Day of Atonement. Out of information for you, that's the holiday that I and my community will be observing beginning tonight. The Holiness Code, which is a separate collection of regulations concerning sacrifice, purity, ethical conduct, sacred times, etc. And lastly, Chapter 27, additional instructions concerning vows and offerings. Now, the sacrificial system is a system that was designed by the priest, and it offered something of value, and it was very much a part of life in the ancient Near East. And some of it is described in great detail in the biblical system of sacrifice, and it can be understood on several levels, though I'm going to focus with you really on only two. On one level, sacrifice can be understood as a gift to a god. And one of the Hebrew words for sacrifice is mincha. And interestingly enough, in the Jewish faith, we still use mincha. The afternoon prayer time is still used and described today, though the original meaning no longer has its same, though the word no longer possesses its original meaning, forgive me. In the Bible, this word has the general meaning of a gift from an inferior to a superior and can have the nuanced tribute of a vassal to a suzerain, really from someone trying or attempting to curry favor of a king or royal leader. In the religious context, a mincha is thus a gift to God, a superior from the offering of an individual or community. As a gift, the sacrifice, whether animal or commodity, could have several functions, including appeasing an angry deity, thanking a supportive deity, or motivating a deity to help the offerer. On an even more anthropomorphic level, the sacrificial animals and other offerings were a meal for the deity presented on the altar, which served as a table. To the deity, they were offered as choice portions. In some biblical sources, we often, though, find critique of the understanding of sacrifice as a gift or meal to the deity. Specifically in Psalm 50, verses 12 through 15, it says, "If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and all that in it is mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and pay your vows to the Most High. Call on me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me." And we can see in other instances of the tension between physical offerings to God and offerings of word and deed. And we see that even described in prophetic works, specifically Amos in the 8th century. So we know that there's been a tension of going back and forth for many, many, many years. The priest would collect portions of harvest crops, which would then be stored in temple treasuries for distribution to the needy or in times of famine, or the next harvest for even to ripen. During a time of the monarchy, when Israel had a monarchy from the 10th to the 6th century, the priests were often under direct control of the monarchy, and sacrificial collections would help centralize the monarchy's power. In addition to the agricultural products, an occasional offering might be made. Now, I've kind of talked about one other thing. The second type of major offering from the mincha is a tithe. So tithing offers a similar function where agricultural produce and livestock are subject to 10%. It's a commodity that must be given to God. In the religious sense, this can be understood as a kind of rent from a tenant to a landlord, or according to Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23, the land itself belongs to God. Functioning, the tithe was a kind of universal taxation which paid for the maintenance of the clergy and ultimately paid for the monarchy itself. Leviticus mentions tithing only in brief notes in concluding appendix, specifically chapter 27, verses 30 through 33. But we can see it's also mentioned in Numbers 18, verses 21 through 32, and explicitly designated for the Levites and other sources. Beyond that, we know that there were other types of sacrifices. And I want to get into that specifically. In chapters 1 through 7 of Leviticus, we read of the burnt offering, also known as the Holocaust. So if you're curious where that term comes from, now you know. An animal sacrifice in which the whole animal, bull, ram, male goat, or bird, was slaughtered and its blood splashed upon the altar, and then the entire animal burned. The grain offering, or the mincha, or gift of flour mixed with oil and incense, a token portion of the offering, was consumed by fire on the altar, and the rest was given to the priests. The sacrifice of well-being, in Leviticus 3 and chapter 7, verse 11 through 38, is similar to a burnt offering that the blood of the animal was sprinkled on the altar, but this type, only the fatty portion of the animal were burnt, and the sin offering and the guilt offering, these offerings of sacrificial animals serve as a kind of substitute for the offender, in which case the blood was sprinkled on the altar, the fatty portions burned, but the rest of the carcass was either discarded or as profane or burned outside of the sanctuary. Both Leviticus and elsewhere in the Bible, other types of sacrifice are also prescribed, and we know of those as the elevation or wave offering, regular daily offerings, weekly offerings of 12 loaves of bread in Exodus, in the presence of incense. Though if you think about it, incense were needed, because I can't imagine something smelling more disgusting than animals being sacrificed and their blood being sprayed, spattered, squirted, and smeared onto a stone altar. So the consecration ceremony and their aftermath. Leviticus 8 through 10 describes the consecration of the Holy of Holies. But before we even get into that, I'm going to move this out. And I do want you to, I'm just going to flip this around just for a second. Hopefully, or not. I apologize. So, hopefully, okay, I had a book. You could see a 4-horned altar, so I encourage you to Google it. And you can see what a biblical altar would have looked like. It had 4 horns on it. I don't have a 3D rendering with me. The second episode that we know about, really there's a couple different episodes of sanctifying and consecrating the space. Now, I do want to talk about the issue of purity and impurity. Now, this comes in Leviticus chapters 11 and 15, and a large part of Leviticus is devoted to instruction concerning purity and impurity. The traditional translates clean and unclean are misleading, for the categories don't deal with hygiene or cleanliness. Rather, according to the definitions of Leviticus, the clean is what is pure, that is suitable for human use, and in some cases required also for the use in ritual. The unclean, on the other hand, is impure and either unsuitable for human use or forbidden for the Israelites. For example, Leviticus 11 lists those animals that may be eaten and those which may be not. So we have several theories as to why this evolved. One, of course, is health. That being, if you leave an animal overnight, it's probably not a good idea to eat its carcass the next day. And recognize that there are certain animals which are carriers or known carriers of disease. Another theory behind this issue of understanding of purity and impurity is cultural differentiation. And one of the ways that cultures distinguish themselves from one another is diet. So if you're only eating parts of an animal and you're eating cows, but you're avoiding other food like pig or dog or cat, in the late 2nd century, this is going to really emerge in an archaeologist, Israel Finkelstein, when he was doing excavations discovered Canaanite property. So how did he know that they were Canaanite versus Israelite? The presence of pig bone was one of the major factors in determining who was doing what, where, when, and how. So even back into the earliest times, the Israelites were not eating pig. Personally, I have no idea what pork tastes like, and I'm absolutely fine with that. Mystery, let it live, let it abound. We also know that there are certain rituals which are specific to the Israelite community, that of circumcision, though there is tremendous debate from different parts of the community for the origins of circumcision. If it was described as Abraham circumcising his son Isaac and Ishmael and subsequently his entire house, then that suggests a fairly early initiation into this ritual. But Moses himself was not circumcised. Now, could that have been because he was living in Pharaoh's house? Sure. Could that have been because there were moments when people weren't circumcising? Sure. If you believe in Moses, why not? The other issue that you have regarding circumcision is when you look in the book of Joshua, we have another instance where people aren't totally circumcised. So when did it become official to circumcise and be a part of the Israelite community? That's up for debate. More ink can be spilled and pages written on that question. The sense of order in her influential book, Purity and Danger, an analysis of the concept of pollution and taboo, British anthropologist Mary Douglas argued that the difference between purity, clean, and impurity, unclean, is based on a theoretical order in which distinct categories must be kept separate and pure. And this she focused on applies to food, and applies to fish, and it applies to the environment in general. So fish, just so you are aware, for it to be deemed kosher, it must have fins and scales. Again, I don't know what lobster tastes like, though I was told as a child I did fish it off of someone's plate and have an allergic reaction to it, which, you know, might explain several things, but in general, no clue what it's all about, and no interest either. Animals must have the ability to chew their cud. That means that they have multiple stomachs and split hooves. And pigs, while they have a divided hoof, they can't chew their cud. And she argued that this goes on and on in understanding of categories and who is clean and who is not clean. The relationship to sex and death. Well, let's unpack that one, shall we? That's always a fun topic. Sex and death, why not? In ancient Israel, as in most cultures, taboos existed concerning death and sex. A person became impure by contact with a corpse or dead animal that was not to be eaten by skin disease, which can be understood as mimicking the decay that occurs after death. And by loss of fluid considered essential for life, such as semen and blood, especially menstrual blood. So any of contact with these types of fluid could in fact make you impure. In some animals, it was prohibited because they are connected with death, especially those that eat other dead animals. So if you don't eat a predatory animal is considered not kosher, a non-predatory animal is considered acceptable. Those that had contact with impure persons also themselves became impure. So you can kind of see it as touch and go, where people, one connecting with something else. Leviticus 13 specifically discusses skin disease and skin conditions, which makes somebody impure. The sara'at, or leper, can make somebody impure, and it speaks really of several conditions, including boils, other eruptions, psoriasis, and fungal infections. What's interesting is that we can see and understand that priests were capable of identifying impurity, and then they're going about and making somebody pure. Leviticus 15 is concerned with impurity and uncleanliness, specifically genital discharge. Males become impure both because of abnormal discharge by normal seminal ejaculation. For the first, which is a medical condition, the period of impurity lasts for 7 days and after the emission stops, followed by a purification offering. The second, the impurity lasts for 1 day and a ritual washing. So if you haven't, during normal menstrual discharge, a woman is considered impure for the 7 days subsequent to the end of her menstruation period. And this is certainly the case with non-menstrual vaginal bleeding. And the woman is impure for 7 days, and a purification ritual must be performed. This purification ritual took place usually in terms of a mikvah or a ritual bath, where Israelites would go down and dunk. We even have references to this in biblical times, and today there's still mikvahs, and today people still practice some of these practices, interestingly enough. Now, Leviticus 16, we have very specific instructions for Yom Kippur, tonight, the Day of Atonement. This ritual serves to purify the priest, the sanctuary, and the people. It is to take place annually on the 10th day of the 7th month, that is, in the fall, according to the spring new year. It's called the Sabbath of Sabbaths. In addition to refraining from work, the Israelites are also to deny themselves, which was later understood to mean to complete fast or perhaps also abstain from sexual intercourse. The Day of Atonement, in addition to sacrificing a bull as a sin offering for the priest Aaron, 2 goats are also provided, and lots are cast for them. One is designed or dedicated as a sin offering to God, the other designated for Azazel, an obscure term probably referring to some sort of a demon, also understood as the scapegoat. So this is the actual scapegoating ritual. The sin of the community is symbolically transferred onto this goat, who is then released into the wilderness. This ritual has magical aspects. It may be kind of partial legitimization of earlier sacrifices to goat demons. It could be a satire. We have no clue. But it is something fascinating, and I know Brettler really offers some wonderful examples of understanding both Yom Kippur, what does it mean, the significance of Kippur versus Chatat, sin offerings, and I think he offers a wonderful explanation of the concepts behind creating ritual. I also think it's important to read his book to understand or grasp some deep understanding of ritual. It's not as if, we today